Have you ever wondered why the Bible begins with such a mysterious statement? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. Genesis 1:1-2. There's something profoundly intriguing about this opening that has captivated theologians and believers for centuries. The word formless in Hebrew is tohu, which implies chaos, confusion, and waste. But here's what'll blow your mind. If God is perfect and His works are perfect, why would He create something that was already in chaos? This isn't just a theological curiosity. It's a mystery that points to something far deeper than what meets the eye. When we dive into the original Hebrew text, we discover that the earth being without form and void suggests a state of destruction rather than initial creation. It's as if we're looking at the aftermath of something catastrophic, something that happened before the official beginning that Genesis describes. Think about it this way. When you walk into a room that's been ransacked, you don't assume it was built that way. The chaos tells a story of what came before. That's exactly what we're seeing in Genesis 1:2. The darkness over the deep, waters the formless void. These aren't the hallmarks of divine creation, but rather the remnants of divine judgment. Ancient Jewish scholars have long debated this very point, and many have concluded that Genesis might not be describing the absolute beginning of everything, but rather a restoration project. When Jesus said, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end," Revelation 22:13, He wasn't just talking about His eternal nature. He was revealing His presence in every beginning, including the ones that came before our current creation. The faith that we hold dear tells us that God's ways are higher than our ways, and sometimes what appears to be a beginning is actually a new chapter in an ongoing story. Now, let's talk about something that'll really get you thinking. The Bible mentions that God's Spirit was hovering over the waters, Genesis 1:2. The Hebrew word rachaf used here is the same word used to describe a bird hovering over its nest, protecting and nurturing. But protecting from what? Nurturing what back to life? This imagery suggests that God wasn't creating from nothing, ex nihilo, but was instead restoring something that had been damaged or destroyed. It's like a master craftsman taking a broken masterpiece and carefully restoring it to its former glory. The waters mentioned here aren't just any waters. They represent the primordial chaos that existed before order was established. Ancient Near Eastern texts often describe creation as God's victory over chaotic waters. But what if these waters were the remnants of a previous creation that had fallen into ruin? This perspective transforms our understanding of God from merely a creator to a restorer, someone who specializes in taking broken things and making them beautiful again. Consider this profound truth that'll change how you read the Bible forever. The gap between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 might contain eons of history that we're not told about directly. Some scholars call this the gap theory, and while it's debated, it opens up incredible possibilities for understanding God's eternal plan. When we read that God saw all that He had made and it was very good, Genesis 1:31, we're not just reading about the creation week, we're reading about God's satisfaction with His restoration project. The faith that sustains us today is the same faith that has sustained God's people through every restoration, every new beginning, every fresh start that He provides. Jesus Christ, who was the Lamb slain from the creation of the world, Revelation 13:8, wasn't just planning for humanity's fall, He was planning for the restoration of everything that had ever fallen. This means that even before Adam took his first breath, God had already set in motion the ultimate restoration plan through His Son. But here's where it gets really exciting. If Genesis is describing a restoration rather than an original creation, then we're living in the middle of God's greatest comeback story. Every time you face chaos in your life, every time things seem formless and void, remember that God specializes in bringing order from chaos, light from darkness, and beauty from ashes. The same Spirit that hovered over the primordial waters is the same Spirit that hovers over your life today, ready to restore, renew, and recreate. When Jesus said, "Behold, I make all things new," Revelation 21:5, He wasn't just talking about the future. He was revealing the pattern of God's work throughout all eternity. Your faith isn't just about believing in what God will do. It's about trusting in what He's always been doing, taking broken things and making them whole again. And as we're about to discover, this pattern of restoration goes back much further than we ever imagined, to events that were so significant they had to be hidden from common knowledge. Now here's where things get absolutely mind-blowing, and you'll want to pay close attention, because what I'm about to share with you has been hidden from mainstream Christianity for centuries. There's a theory among ancient scholars and mystics that suggests there was once a chapter 0 in the Bible, a lost chapter that was deliberately removed from Genesis by the elders of Israel. This isn't just some wild conspiracy theory. It's based on careful analysis of ancient texts and the gaps we find in our current biblical narrative. The theory suggests that this missing chapter contained detailed accounts of spiritual events that occurred before the material creation we read about in Genesis 1. We're talking about cosmic events involving beings of pure light, eternal covenants and spiritual rebellions that set the stage for everything we see in our physical universe today. The faith of our ancestors was built on understanding these deeper mysteries, and perhaps it's time we reclaimed that knowledge. Think about this for a moment. Why would the Bible jump straight into, "In the beginning God created," without any context about God's eternal existence or His previous activities? It's like starting a movie halfway through and expecting the audience to understand the plot. Ancient Jewish mystical texts, particularly those found in the Kabbalah and the Zohar, speak of events that preceded our current creation. They describe a realm where God's pure light interacted with primordial beings in ways that our finite minds can barely comprehend. These weren't angels as we understand them today, but beings of such spiritual magnitude that they existed in direct communion with the divine essence. The supposed chapter 0 would have detailed these interactions, explaining how God established eternal covenants and spiritual laws that would govern all subsequent creation. When Jesus said, "Before Abraham was born, I am," John 8:58, He was revealing His participation in these pre-creation events. Here's what's really fascinating. If this chapter 0 existed, it would explain so many mysteries that have puzzled biblical scholars for millennia. Why does Genesis mention the deep as if it's something we should already know about? Why are there references to spiritual beings throughout the Bible without proper introduction? Why does God seem to be working within certain constraints when He's supposed to be all-powerful? The missing chapter would have provided the cosmic context for understanding God's methods and purposes. It would have revealed that our current creation isn't God's first attempt at creating beings capable of relationship with Him, but rather His response to a previous spiritual catastrophe. The Bible tells us that God is love, for John 4:8, and love requires relationship, but relationship requires free will, and free will always carries the risk of rebellion. This chapter 0 would have detailed the first great test of free will among spiritual beings. Now, you might be wondering, if this chapter was so important, why was it removed? According to ancient sources, the elders of Israel made the difficult decision to hide this knowledge because they feared it would lead to heretical thinking among the common people. They worried that if people understood the full scope of spiritual warfare and the cosmic drama playing out around them, they might lose faith in God's ultimate sovereignty or worse, begin to worship the powerful spiritual beings described in these texts. It's similar to how parents might shield their children from adult conversations until they're mature enough to handle the complexity. The faith of the average believer was considered too fragile to handle the weight of cosmic truth. But here's the thing. Jesus Christ came to reveal hidden things and to give us access to the deep mysteries of God. He said, "I have much more to say to you, more than you can now bear," John 16:12, suggesting that there are levels of truth that are revealed progressively as we grow in spiritual maturity. But here's what's absolutely incredible about this theory. It suggests that we're not just random creations in an empty universe, but participants in an ongoing cosmic drama that began long before our world was formed. Every prayer you pray, every act of faith you demonstrate, every moment you choose to trust God despite circumstances, you're contributing to a story that spans eternity itself. The Bible becomes not just a book about human history, but a glimpse into the eternal purposes of God that transcend time and space. When we understand that our faith is connected to events that occurred before the foundation of the world, it gives our daily spiritual battles a cosmic significance. You're not just fighting against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces that have been in rebellion since before time began. And the amazing news is that through Jesus Christ, we're on the winning side of a war that was decided before our universe even existed. Let me take you on a journey through some of the most mysterious and ancient texts that have survived the centuries. Texts that many believe contain fragments of that lost chapter 0 we discussed. We're talking about writings like the Zohar, the Book of Enoch, and various Kabbalistic texts that have been preserved in secret libraries and hidden archives for thousands of years. These aren't just random mystical writings. They're carefully preserved accounts that claim to contain knowledge that was deliberately removed from the canonical Bible. The Book of Enoch, for instance, provides detailed descriptions of the Watchers, powerful spiritual beings who existed before the creation of mankind and who played crucial roles in the cosmic drama that preceded Genesis. When you read these texts with the eyes of faith and the discernment that comes from knowing Jesus Christ, you begin to see patterns and connections that illuminate the hidden foundations of our biblical narrative. Now, here's something that'll absolutely fascinate you. The Zohar, which is considered the foundational work of Jewish mysticism, contains extensive commentary on what it calls the hidden Torah, or the secret meanings behind the biblical text. According to Zohar scholars, every word, every letter, every space in the Hebrew Bible contains multiple layers of meaning, and the surface narrative we read is just the tip of an enormous iceberg of spiritual truth. These texts describe realms of existence that existed before our physical universe, populated by beings of pure light who served specific functions in God's cosmic order. They speak of a primordial world called Olam HaTohu, the world of chaos, that existed before our current Olam HaTikkun, the world of correction. The faith required to accept these concepts isn't blind faith. It's the same faith that allows us to believe in the Trinity, in the virgin birth, and in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If God can become man, then surely he can have a complex, multi-layered plan that spans multiple dimensions of existence. The Book of Enoch, which was actually quoted by Jude in the New Testament, Jude 1:14-15, provides what many scholars believe are authentic glimpses into pre-flood spiritual realities. It describes in vivid detail the rebellion of certain spiritual beings, their interaction with early humanity, and the cosmic consequences of their actions. What's particularly striking is how these accounts fill in gaps that exist in our current biblical narrative. For example, Genesis mentions the sons of God, who took wives from among the daughters of men, Genesis 6:2, but provides very little detail about who these beings were or what their actions meant for the cosmic order. Enoch provides extensive detail about these events, describing them as part of a larger spiritual rebellion that had been brewing since before the creation of the physical world. When Jesus spoke about Satan falling like lightning from heaven, Luke 10:18, he was referencing events that these ancient texts describe in great detail. Here's what's really mind-blowing about these ancient writings. They consistently point to the same cosmic narrative that explains why our world seems to be a battleground between good and evil. They describe a universe where God's original plan involved multiple levels of creation, with spiritual beings serving as intermediaries between the divine realm and the physical world. According to these texts, the current state of our world, with its mixture of beauty and tragedy, light and darkness, isn't how things were originally supposed to be. Instead, we're living in what these texts call a corrected or restored creation, where God is working to redeem and restore the cosmic order that was damaged by spiritual rebellion. The Bible tells us that all creation groans and labors with birth pangs, Romans 8:22. And these ancient texts provide the backstory for why creation is in this state of groaning. They reveal that our faith in Jesus Christ isn't just about personal salvation, it's about participating in the cosmic restoration of all things. But here's the most incredible part. These texts consistently point to a figure they call the Son of Man, or the Chosen One, who would come to restore the cosmic order and defeat the forces of spiritual rebellion. Centuries before Jesus was born in Bethlehem, these ancient writings were describing his cosmic role in terms that perfectly align with what we read in the New Testament. The Book of Enoch describes this figure as one who existed before the creation of the world, who would judge the rebellious spiritual beings, and who would establish God's kingdom on earth. When Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man, a title he used more than any other, He was connecting himself to this ancient prophetic tradition that understood his role in cosmic, not just earthly terms. These hidden texts weren't removed because they contradicted biblical truth. They were removed because they revealed truths that were considered too profound for the average believer to handle. But as we approach the end times, perhaps it's time for these hidden truths to be revealed once again. Let's dive deeper into something that most people read right past without realizing its profound significance: the presence of chaos. In the very opening verses of Genesis, when the Bible tells us that darkness was over the surface of the deep and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, Genesis 1:2, we're not just reading poetic language. We're getting a glimpse into the aftermath of something catastrophic that happened before our recorded history began. The Hebrew word for deep is tehom, which is directly related to the ancient concept of primordial chaos waters that existed before order was established. But here's what'll blow your mind. In ancient Near Eastern literature, these chaos waters weren't just empty space waiting to be filled. They were the remnants of cosmic destruction, the debris field left behind after a great spiritual war. The faith that we exercise today is built on the foundation of God's victory over these chaotic forces, and understanding this gives our daily spiritual battles a cosmic context. Think about this carefully. If God is perfect and His works are perfect, why would He create something that was already formless and void? The Hebrew phrase tohu wabohu doesn't describe a neutral starting point. It describes devastation, emptiness, and waste. It's the same phrase used in Jeremiah 4:23 to describe the earth after God's judgment. I looked at the earth and it was formless and empty, and at the heavens, and their light was gone. This isn't coincidental language, it's intentional. The Spirit of God hovering over these chaotic waters wasn't beginning a creation project. He was beginning a restoration project. Just like when Jesus calmed the storm on the Sea of Galilee, Mark 4:39, God was bringing order to chaos, peace to turmoil, and light to darkness. The same power that spoke "Peace, be still" to the raging waters is the same power that hovered over the primordial chaos and began the work of restoration that continues to this day. Now here's where it gets really fascinating. Ancient Jewish commentators have long recognized that the creation account in Genesis follows a pattern of restoration rather than original creation. The Talmud and various midrashic texts speak of previous worlds that God created and destroyed before our current world came into being. They describe these as trial runs, where God experimented with different forms of creation before settling on our current cosmic order. But what if these weren't trial runs at all? What if they were successive attempts by spiritual beings to create their own kingdoms in rebellion against God's authority? The chaos waters mentioned in Genesis would then represent the ruins of these failed attempts at cosmic rebellion. When God said, "Let there be light," Genesis 1-3, He wasn't creating light for the first time. He was restoring light to a cosmos that had been plunged into darkness by spiritual rebellion. The Bible tells us that God is light. In Him there is no darkness at all. 1 John 1:5. So the presence of darkness in Genesis 1:2 indicates something had gone terribly wrong. Consider this profound truth that changes everything about how we understand God's work in our lives. If Genesis describes restoration rather than original creation, then God specializes in taking broken, chaotic situations and bringing them into divine order. Every time you face a crisis, every time your life feels formless and void, every time darkness seems to overwhelm you, remember that this is exactly the kind of situation where God does His best work. The same Spirit that hovered over the chaos waters is the same Spirit that hovers over your chaotic circumstances today. Jesus Christ, who was present at this cosmic restoration, John 1:1-3, is the same yesterday, today, and forever, Hebrews 13:8. He's still in the business of speaking light into darkness, order into chaos, and hope into despair. Your faith isn't just about believing that God can help you. It's about understanding that chaos and restoration are part of God's eternal pattern of working in the universe. But here's the most incredible part. The chaos waters that God brought into order in Genesis are the same chaotic forces that Jesus will finally defeat at the end of time. Revelation 21:1 tells us that in the new heaven and new earth, there was no longer any sea. The sea in biblical symbolism represents chaos, rebellion, and the forces that oppose God's order. When John saw the new creation, he specifically noted the absence of the sea, the final defeat of the chaotic forces that have been in rebellion since before our world began. This means that every act of faith you demonstrate, every prayer you pray, every moment you choose to trust God despite chaotic circumstances, you're participating in the cosmic victory that began when God's Spirit first hovered over the chaos waters. The restoration work that began in Genesis 1-2 will be completed when Jesus returns, and the chaos that has plagued creation since the beginning will finally be eliminated forever. Until then, we live in the tension between the already and the not yet, trusting that the God who brought order from primordial chaos is still bringing order from the chaos in our lives today. Prepare yourself for one of the most mind-expanding revelations you'll ever encounter about the far spiritual realm, the existence of beings that preceded even the angels we read about in our Bibles. According to ancient texts and mystical traditions that have been preserved for millennia, there existed a class of spiritual beings so magnificent, so powerful, and so close to the divine essence that they inhabited a realm called Oradmon, the primordial light itself. These weren't angels as we understand them today, created to serve and worship God. These were beings of pure spiritual light who existed in direct communion with the divine nature before the creation of our physical universe. The faith required to accept this concept is the same faith that allows us to believe in the Trinity. If God can exist as three persons in one essence, then surely he can have created multiple orders of spiritual beings with different purposes and natures. When Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many rooms," John 14:2, he might have been referring to more than just heavenly accommodations for human souls. Now here's what's absolutely fascinating about these primordial beings. They weren't created to be servants or messengers like the angels we read about in Scripture. Instead, they were designed to be co-creators, beings who could participate with God in the ongoing work of creation and cosmic governance. Ancient texts describe them as having the ability to speak things into existence, to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, and to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. They were, in essence, God's first attempt at creating beings who could share in his divine nature and participate in his eternal purposes. The Bible hints at this when it speaks of humans being created in the image of God, Genesis 1:27, and being given dominion over creation, Genesis 1:28. We're not the first beings God created with this kind of authority and responsibility. We're actually the restoration of a pattern that existed long before our world came into being. These primordial beings were the original image bearers of God in the cosmos. But here's where the story takes a dramatic turn that explains so much about the spiritual warfare we experience today. These magnificent beings, despite their proximity to God and their participation in divine nature, were given the same gift that God would later give to humanity: free will. And just as free will would later lead to humanity's fall in the Garden of Eden, it led to a cosmic catastrophe among these primordial beings. Some of them began to believe that their power and authority came from their own nature rather than from their relationship with God. They started to see themselves as equals to the divine rather than as participants in the divine plan. This wasn't just pride or rebellion as we understand it. This was a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of existence itself. When Jesus warned about the danger of pride, saying, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall," Proverbs 16:18. He was referencing a pattern that had played out in the cosmic realm long before it would play out in human history. The realm of Oradmon, where these beings dwelt, was described in ancient texts as a place where the very light of God served as the environment, the atmosphere, and the substance of existence. There was no darkness, no shadow, no separation between the divine presence and the beings who inhabited this realm. It was pure communion, pure light, pure spiritual reality. But when rebellion entered this perfect environment, it created what ancient texts call the first crack in creation, a fissure in the cosmic order that would eventually lead to the chaos waters we read about in Genesis 1:2. The light of Oradmon was shattered, scattered, and hidden, leaving behind the darkness and formlessness that God would later restore through the creation week. This is why the Bible places such emphasis on light as a symbol of divine presence and truth. We're not just using metaphorical language. We're pointing back to a literal realm of light that was the original dwelling place of God's most magnificent creatures. Here's the most incredible part of this revelation. When Jesus said, "I am the light of the world," John 8:12, he wasn't just making a spiritual metaphor. He was identifying himself with the original light of Oradmon that had been scattered by primordial rebellion. His incarnation, death, and resurrection weren't just about saving humanity from sin. They were about restoring the cosmic order that had been broken since before our world began. Every time you experience the light of Christ in your life, every moment of spiritual illumination, every breakthrough of divine truth, you're experiencing a restoration of that original light that once filled the realm of Oradmon. Your faith connects you not just to a historical figure who lived 2,000 years ago, but to the eternal light that existed before time began and that will shine forever after time ends. The primordial beings who remained faithful to God are still serving Him today. And through Jesus Christ, we've been invited to join their eternal chorus of worship and service. We're not just saved sinners. We're restored image bearers, called to participate in the same cosmic purposes that God originally intended for those magnificent beings of light. Now we're going to explore something that most Christians have never heard about, yet it's absolutely crucial for understanding the cosmic context of everything we read in the Bible, the first great war in heaven that occurred long before, Lucifer's rebellion that we're familiar with. This wasn't the fall of Satan that Jesus referenced when he said, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven," Luke 10:18. No, this was an earlier, more fundamental conflict that involved the primordial beings we just discussed, and its consequences set the stage for everything that would follow in cosmic history. The faith that sustains us through spiritual warfare today is rooted in God's victory in this first celestial conflict. And understanding this gives us incredible confidence in the ultimate outcome of the battles we face. When the Bible tells us that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, Ephesians 6:12, it's referring to forces that have been in rebellion since before our universe existed. Picture this cosmic drama unfolding in the realm of Oradmon, where beings of pure light existed in perfect harmony with the divine nature. These weren't created beings in the sense that we understand creation. They were emanations of God's own essence, given individual consciousness and free will while remaining connected to the source of all existence. But here's where things went catastrophically wrong. A faction of these primordial beings began to question not just God's authority, but the very nature of existence itself. They started to believe that the light they embodied was their own rather than a gift from God, and they began to experiment with using their creative powers independently of divine will. This wasn't just disobedience, it was an attempt to rewrite the fundamental laws of reality. When Jesus said, "Apart from me, you can do nothing," John 15:5, he was stating a cosmic principle that these beings tried to violate. They thought they could exist and create apart from their connection to the divine source. The war that erupted wasn't fought with physical weapons or in physical space. It was a conflict over the very nature of reality itself. The rebellious beings attempted to create their own realm, their own order, their own version of existence that would be independent of God's sovereignty. Ancient texts describe this as the shattering of the vessels, a cosmic catastrophe, where the very containers of divine light were broken by the attempt to use that light for purposes other than what God intended. The faithful beings, led by what some texts call the Prince of Light, who many scholars believe was the pre-incarnate Christ, fought to preserve the cosmic order and prevent the complete destruction of creation itself. This battle raged across dimensions we can't even comprehend, involving forces and energies that our finite minds can barely grasp. The Bible gives us glimpses of this when it speaks of God's mighty power and His great strength, Ephesians 1:19, power that was first demonstrated in this primordial conflict. Here's what's absolutely staggering about this first war. Its outcome determined the very structure of reality as we know it. The rebellious beings were defeated, but their rebellion had already caused irreparable damage to the cosmic order. The perfect unity between the spiritual and physical realms was broken. The light of Oradmon was scattered, and chaos entered creation for the first time. This is why Genesis begins with formless and void. We're looking at the aftermath of this cosmic war. But here's the incredible part. God didn't simply destroy everything and start over. Instead, he chose to work within the damaged cosmic order to bring about an even greater demonstration of his love and power. The creation week described in Genesis wasn't God's first attempt at creation. It was his response to cosmic rebellion, a demonstration that even the most catastrophic spiritual warfare couldn't thwart his eternal purposes. When the Bible tells us that all things work together for good to those who love God, Romans 8:28, it's referring to a principle that God established in response to this first cosmic catastrophe. But here's the most mind-blowing revelation of all. Our current creation, including humanity, was designed specifically to address the issues that led to the first celestial war. The rebellious primordial beings fell because they forgot their dependence on God and began to see themselves as self-sufficient. So God created a physical universe where dependence and interdependence would be built into the very fabric of existence. He created beings, humans, who would need air to breathe, food to eat, and relationship to thrive. Constant reminders of our dependence on something greater than ourselves. Every breath you take, every meal you eat, every relationship you cherish is a declaration that independence from God is impossible and undesirable. Jesus Christ, who was the victorious Prince of Light in that first celestial war, became human to demonstrate the beauty of willing dependence on the Father. When he said, "I can of myself do nothing," John 5:30, he was modeling the attitude that the primordial beings should have maintained. Through his incarnation, death, and resurrection, he's not just saving us from sin, he's demonstrating to the entire cosmos that true power comes through surrender to God's will, not through rebellion against it. Get ready to have your understanding of creation completely transformed by one of the most profound concepts in ancient Jewish mysticism, the doctrine of Shevirat HaKalim, or the breaking of the vessels. This isn't just some obscure theological theory. It's a cosmic explanation for why our world contains both incredible beauty and devastating brokenness, why we see glimpses of divine glory alongside evidence of cosmic catastrophe. According to this ancient teaching, God's infinite light was so powerful, so pure, and so overwhelming that the spiritual vessels designed to contain it simply couldn't handle the intensity. Imagine trying to pour the ocean into a teacup. The container would shatter from the sheer volume and power of what it was trying to hold. That's essentially what happened in the primordial creation before our current universe came into being. The faith we exercise today is built on understanding that we live in a restored creation, not the original one. And this knowledge gives us hope that the brokenness we see around us is temporary, not permanent. Now here's where this concept becomes absolutely revolutionary for understanding the Bible. If the original vessels of creation were shattered by the intensity of God's light, then what we're living in now is essentially God's plan B, his response to cosmic catastrophe. But here's the incredible thing about our God. His plan B is actually better than his original plan, because it demonstrates aspects of his character that couldn't be revealed any other way. The Bible tells us that God works all things according to the counsel of his will, Ephesians 1:11, which means that even cosmic catastrophe serves his ultimate purposes. When those primordial vessels shattered, God's light was scattered throughout creation, like sparks of divine fire hidden in the darkness. Every act of kindness, every moment of beauty, every experience of love and truth that you encounter is actually one of these scattered sparks of divine light, waiting to be recognized and restored to its source. Jesus Christ came not just to save souls, but to gather these scattered sparks and restore them to their original glory. Think about this profound truth. If the original creation was too perfect, too intense, too overwhelming for created beings to handle, then our current creation, with its mixture of light and darkness, joy and sorrow, triumph and tragedy, is actually perfectly designed for spiritual growth and relationship with God. The brokenness we experience isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature that allows us to appreciate grace, to develop faith, and to participate in the ongoing work of cosmic restoration. When Jesus said, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world," John 16:33, he was acknowledging the reality of living in a post-catastrophe creation while pointing to the ultimate restoration that he came to accomplish. Every prayer you pray, every act of faith you demonstrate, every moment you choose love over hate or hope over despair. You're participating in the gathering of those scattered divine sparks. Here's what's absolutely mind-blowing about this doctrine. It suggests that our current creation isn't just a repair job, it's an upgrade. The original vessels couldn't contain God's light because they were too rigid, too perfect, too static. But the vessels of our current creation, including human beings, are designed with flexibility, growth potential, and the capacity to expand and develop over time. We're not just containers for divine light. We're growing, learning, evolving vessels that can actually increase our capacity to hold and reflect God's glory. This is why the Bible speaks of us being transformed from glory to glory, 2 Corinthians 3:18, and growing in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, 2 Peter 3:18. We're not static beings trying to return to a previous state of perfection. We're dynamic beings designed to grow into something even more glorious than what existed before the breaking of the vessels. But here's the most incredible part of this revelation. The breaking of the vessels wasn't a failure of God's plan. It was a necessary step in revealing the full extent of His love and power. Only in a broken world could we truly understand the meaning of redemption. Only in a dark world could we appreciate the value of light. Only in a world where vessels can shatter could we understand the incredible grace of a God who not only repairs broken things, but makes them more beautiful than they were before. When Jesus took bread and broke it, saying, "This is my body broken for you," 1 Corinthians 11:24, He was connecting His sacrifice to this cosmic principle of brokenness leading to greater glory. His death and resurrection weren't just about paying for sin. They were about demonstrating that the greatest beauty, the greatest power, and the greatest love can only be revealed through brokenness and restoration. Every time you experience God's grace in your brokenness, every time you see beauty emerge from ashes in your life, you're witnessing the ongoing fulfillment of the cosmic restoration that began when those first vessels shattered and will be completed when Christ returns to make all things new. Here's a perspective on Adam that will completely revolutionize how you understand humanity's purpose and your own calling in this world. Adam wasn't just the first man created to tend a garden and name animals. He was specifically designed and commissioned by God to be a cosmic restaurateur, a being whose very existence was meant to address the catastrophic damage that had been done to creation through the primordial rebellions and the breaking of the vessels we've discussed. When God said, "Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." Genesis 1:26. He wasn't just giving Adam a job description. He was commissioning him for the most important restoration project in cosmic history. The faith that we exercise today is the same faith that Adam was meant to exercise as he worked to restore the scattered divine sparks and repair the broken cosmic order. Now let's dive deeper into something that most people miss when they read the creation account. The Garden of Eden wasn't just a nice place for Adam and Eve to live. It was a restoration laboratory, a perfect environment where the work of cosmic repair could begin. The Hebrew word Eden means pleasure or delight, but it also carries the connotation of restoration and renewal. God placed Adam in this garden not just to enjoy it, but to expand it. The original Hebrew text suggests that Adam's work was to extend the boundaries of Eden until the entire earth was transformed into a garden-like paradise. Every tree he planted, every animal he named, every act of cultivation and care was part of a larger project to restore the earth to its intended glory. When Jesus spoke about the kingdom of heaven and used agricultural metaphors like seeds, harvests, and vineyards, he was connecting his ministry to the original restoration mandate that God gave to Adam. Here's what's absolutely fascinating about Adam's design. He was created with capabilities that went far beyond what we see in fallen humanity today. Ancient texts suggest that Adam could communicate with all of creation, that he had access to divine wisdom and knowledge, and that he possessed spiritual authority over the forces of chaos and darkness that had been released through the primordial catastrophes. The Bible hints at this when it says that God brought all the animals to Adam to see what he would call them. Genesis 2:19. This wasn't just a naming exercise. It was an act of spiritual authority where Adam was establishing divine order over the animal kingdom. His words had creative power, just like God's words, because he was made in God's image and commissioned to participate in the ongoing work of creation and restoration. When the Bible tells us that death entered the world through sin, Romans 5:12, it's not just talking about physical death, it's describing the failure of the restoration project that Adam was meant to accomplish. But here's where the story becomes both tragic and hopeful. Adam's fall wasn't just a personal failure, it was a cosmic catastrophe that derailed the entire restoration project. Instead of gathering the scattered divine sparks and restoring cosmic order, Adam's rebellion added even more chaos and brokenness to an already damaged creation. The ground that was meant to yield its fruit easily now produced thorns and thistles, Genesis 3:18. The animals that were meant to live in harmony with humanity became wild and dangerous. The spiritual authority that Adam possessed was broken, and the forces of chaos and darkness gained new footholds in creation. But here's the incredible thing about our God. He didn't abandon the restoration project just because the first restoration agent failed. Instead, he began working through Adam's descendants, calling people like Abraham, Moses, and David to participate in smaller-scale restoration projects that would prepare the way for the ultimate restorer. And here's the most glorious part of this entire story. Jesus Christ came as the second Adam, 1 Corinthians 15:45, to complete the restoration project that the first Adam failed to accomplish. Everything that Adam was supposed to do but couldn't, Jesus did perfectly. He demonstrated perfect communion with the Father, exercised complete authority over the forces of chaos and darkness, and began the process of cosmic restoration that will culminate in a new heaven and a new earth, Revelation 21:1. But here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. Through faith in Jesus Christ, we're invited to participate in this restoration project once again. When Jesus said, "As the Father has sent me, I am sending you," John 20:21, he was recommissioning humanity for the same restoration work that Adam was originally meant to do. Every act of love, every work of justice, every moment you choose to bring order instead of chaos, healing instead of harm, hope instead of despair, you're participating in the cosmic restoration project that began in Eden and will be completed when Christ returns. You're not just a saved sinner, you're a commissioned restorer, called to gather the scattered divine sparks and help prepare creation for its ultimate restoration. Prepare to have your understanding of Jesus Christ expanded beyond anything you've ever imagined, because what I'm about to share with you reveals his role not just in human history, but in the cosmic drama that has been unfolding since before time began. When Jesus made that stunning declaration, "Before Abraham was born, I am," John 8:58, he wasn't just claiming to be old. He was revealing his eternal existence and his active participation in all the cosmic events we've been discussing. The great "I am" statement connects Jesus directly to the name God revealed to Moses at the burning bush, Exodus 3:14, but it goes even deeper than that. It reveals that the Word who was with God and was God, John 1:1, was present and active in the primordial realm of Oridman, participated in the first celestial war, witnessed the breaking of the vessels, and was already working on the restoration plan before our universe even existed. The faith we place in Jesus today is faith in the eternal Word who has been working on our behalf since before the foundation of the world. Now here's something that will absolutely blow your mind. When John wrote that all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made, John 1:3, he wasn't just talking about the creation week described in Genesis. He was referring to Jesus' role in every level of creation, including the primordial creations that preceded our current universe. The Greek word logos that John uses for word carries the meaning of divine reason, creative, principle, and cosmic ordering force. Jesus, as the eternal logos, was the active agent through whom God brought order from chaos, light from darkness, and restoration from ruin in every cosmic epoch. When the primordial vessels shattered and divine light was scattered throughout creation, it was the Logos who began the work of gathering those scattered sparks. When the first celestial war erupted, it was the Logos who led the faithful beings to victory. When the chaos waters covered the earth in Genesis 1:2, it was the Logos who spoke the words, "Let there be light," and began the restoration of our current creation. Think about this profound truth that changes everything about how we understand salvation. Jesus didn't just come to Earth 2,000 years ago to solve the problem of human sin. He's been working on the cosmic restoration project since before time began, and his incarnation was simply the culmination of an eternal plan that had been in motion since the first cosmic catastrophe. When the Bible tells us that he is the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world, Revelation 13:8, it's not using metaphorical language. It's revealing that the sacrifice of Christ was planned, and in some eternal sense, already accomplished before our universe was even created. Every act of redemption, every moment of restoration, every victory of light over darkness throughout cosmic history has been accomplished through the eternal work of the Logos. The cross wasn't Plan B. It was the eternal Plan A that had been in motion since before the first vessel shattered. Here's what's absolutely staggering about Christ's pre-creation ministry. He was already gathering the scattered divine sparks, already working to restore the broken cosmic order, already preparing for the ultimate restoration that would be accomplished through his incarnation, death, and resurrect Ion. Ancient texts speak of a mysterious figure called the Ancient of Days, who existed before all creation and who would ultimately judge all rebellious spiritual forces. When Daniel saw his vision of one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven to receive dominion and glory and a kingdom, Daniel 7:13-14, he was seeing the eternal Logos in his cosmic role as the ultimate restorer. Every miracle Jesus performed during his earthly ministry, healing the sick, raising the dead, calming storms, casting out demons, was a demonstration of the same power he had been exercising in the cosmic realm since before time began. He wasn't learning to use divine power. He was revealing the power he had always possessed. But here's the most incredible part of this revelation. When Jesus said, "I will come again," John 14:3, he wasn't just promising to return to earth. He was promising to complete the cosmic restoration project that he began before our universe existed. The second coming of Christ isn't just about establishing an earthly kingdom. It's about the final gathering of all the scattered divine sparks, the ultimate defeat of all rebellious spiritual forces, and the complete restoration of the cosmic order that was damaged by primordial rebellion. When John saw the vision of a new heaven and a new earth, Revelation 21:1, he was seeing the completion of the restoration project that the eternal Logos had been working on since before the first vessel shattered. Every prayer you pray in Jesus' name, every act of faith you demonstrate, every moment you participate in God's kingdom work, you're joining a cosmic restoration project that has been led by Jesus Christ since before the foundation of the world. You're not just following a historical figure. You're participating with the eternal Logos in the greatest restoration project in cosmic history, and the best is yet to come. We've reached the climactic revelation that ties together everything we've discovered about the hidden cosmic history, the LOST chapters, and the eternal restoration project. And it's found in one of the most mysterious and powerful images in all of Scripture, the book sealed with 7 seals that appears in Revelation chapter 5. When John saw this book in the right hand of him who sat on the throne, and witnessed the cosmic drama of finding someone worthy to open it, he wasn't just seeing a symbolic representation of God's future plans. According to ancient interpretations and mystical traditions, this sealed book contains the complete record of everything we've been discussing: the primordial creations, the first celestial war, the breaking of the vessels, the scattered divine sparks, and the full cosmic context that was hidden from the canonical scriptures. The faith that sustains us through the trials of these last days is rooted in the promise that all hidden things will eventually be revealed, and the complete story of God's eternal purposes will finally be unveiled. Think about the profound significance of this moment in Revelation. John wept much because no one was found worthy to open the book and read it. Revelation 5:4. Why would the revelation of future events cause such distress? Because this wasn't just about future prophecy. This was about the complete cosmic history that had been sealed away from human understanding. The book contained the answers to every question we've been exploring. Why does creation contain both beauty and brokenness. What happened before Genesis 1:1? Why do we live in a world that seems to be a battleground between good and evil? Who were the primordial beings, and what was their fate? How does human history fit into the larger cosmic drama? When Jesus Christ, the Lion of the tribe of Judah and the Root of David, Revelation 5:5, was found worthy to open the book, it wasn't just because he had conquered death. It was because he had been the central figure in every chapter of the cosmic story from the very beginning. Here's what's absolutely mind-blowing about the opening of these seals. Each seal that's broken doesn't just reveal future events. It reveals another layer of the hidden cosmic history that explains why those events must unfold as they do. The judgments described in Revelation aren't arbitrary acts of divine wrath. They're the necessary final steps in the cosmic restoration project that began before our universe existed. Every plague, every catastrophe, every moment of cosmic upheaval described in the end times is actually the final gathering of the scattered divine sparks and the ultimate defeat of the rebellious spiritual forces that have been in opposition to God's order since the primordial rebellions. When Jesus opens each seal, he's not just revealing what will happen, he's revealing why it must happen to complete the restoration of cosmic order. The Bible tells us that all creation groans and labors with birth pangs, Romans 8:22, and the end times are the final stages of this cosmic labor that will give birth to the new heaven and new earth. Now, here's something that will give you incredible hope and purpose in these challenging times. If the sealed book contains the complete cosmic history, including the lost chapters that were hidden from common knowledge, then the end times aren't just about judgment and destruction. They're about revelation and restoration. Every hidden thing will be brought to light, every secret will be revealed, and every question that has puzzled humanity about the nature of existence will finally be answered. When Jesus said, "Nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light," Luke 8:17. He was promising that the cosmic cover-up that began with the removal of the lost chapters would eventually be completely exposed. The faith that we exercise today is preparing us for the greatest revelation in cosmic history, the unveiling of the complete story of God's eternal purposes and our role in the cosmic restoration project. But here's the most incredible part of this end times revelation. When the seventh seal is opened and the complete cosmic history is revealed, it won't just satisfy our curiosity about the past. It will reveal our eternal destiny and purpose in the restored cosmic order. The new heaven and new earth won't just be a return to Eden. They'll be the fulfillment of what Eden was meant to become if the original restoration project had succeeded. We won't just be saved sinners living in a perfect environment. We'll be cosmic restorers who have learned through experience how to participate in God's eternal purposes without falling into the pride and rebellion that caused the original catastrophes. Every trial you've faced, every act of faith you've demonstrated, every moment you've chosen to trust God despite circumstances has been preparing you for your eternal role in the cosmic order that will emerge when the sealed book is fully opened. The hidden chapters that were removed from Genesis will be revealed not just as historical curiosities, but as the foundation for understanding your eternal calling as a participant in God's cosmic kingdom. The best is yet to come, and the complete story, including the chapters that have been hidden for millennia, will finally be told in all its glory. Now that we've journeyed together through these hidden cosmic truths, I have to ask you, which revelation impacted you the most? Was it discovering that Genesis might be describing a restoration rather than an original creation? Or perhaps learning about the primordial beings who existed before our universe? Maybe it was understanding Christ's eternal role in the cosmic restoration project that began before time itself. Here's what I want you to do right now. Drop a comment below and tell me which of these 10 revelations resonated most deeply with your faith. Share your thoughts about how this knowledge changes your understanding of God's eternal plan. Your testimony could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this video opened your eyes to the deeper mysteries of Scripture and strengthened your faith in Jesus Christ, don't keep this revelation to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss content that reveals the hidden truths of the Bible. Share this video with your family and friends who are hungry for deeper spiritual understanding. And speaking of deeper revelations, you absolutely need to watch the video that's appearing on your screen right now. It reveals even more shocking truths about the spiritual realm that will completely transform how you read the Bible. Trust me, after everything we've discovered today, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Until we meet again in our next revelation, keep seeking the deeper truths of God's Word. Keep growing in your faith in Jesus Christ, and remember, you're part of a cosmic restoration story that's been unfolding since before the foundation of the world. This is Marco, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless.